Alright, next photo. I really like her expression and I like how she's actually smiling, and you can always tell when somebody's really smiling looking at these lines here. And the only thing that bothers me is the composition, because I feel like there's a lot of negative space and you're cutting off her head and her hand on this side here. I wish there was a little bit more room for her to breathe on these two sides. So yeah, the only thing I would really fix here is to make sure that you have a little bit more room here. Perhaps there's a lot of clutter on this side and maybe more on this side, and that's why you had to do this. If that's the case, I would probably try to go for a different crop. Let's see, something a little more interesting maybe. Like I feel like that fills the frame a little more. The only other thing that I want to talk about here is when you shoot moments in profile. I find that when it's one person, it's typically stronger when you can see eyes and hands. For that reason, I try to go straight on for most of these. And if I'm doing something in profile, I like to show the relationship with this particular subject and somebody else. At least a hand coming in or something here that shows off, what this person is laughing about. That's just my opinion, but I do like the photo overall. All right, moving on. I really like the use of the backlight and how they're well lit in this photograph. I do also like the colors in the background. I'm not big on the color punch of her blue dress and over here in his bow tie. It seems to be a lot, and he seems a little bit red on his face. And now a little bit about the pose. When someone is like above average in weight and you have them kind of turn their head this way and you shoot into about this much neck, it doesn't flatter them. And also when you have the arm first hitting the camera, it also doesn't flatter them. So I want to get their faces hitting the camera first. So in this case, what you could do is move her feet back and then have her lean forward and then have him come into her so she's not stretching her neck as this much to look at him. Because when she stretches her neck and she looks over at him, you've got all of this neck, this happening, and also the white in her eyes is quite a lot more than being able to see any pupil. So those are the things that I would watch out for. Okay, I really like the idea behind this concept. I like how you've used the night sky and lit the couple. The light on them looks great. Now the composition, however, again, it's like the last photo where there's an imbalance between the negative space and the couple, because he's cut off and then they're cut off really oddly, and therefore it feels like a part of the photo is missing, and it also feels like they're in the corner for no deliberate reasoning. So it looks unfinished in that regard. You could perhaps, clone this guy over to the other side and then have like equal amount of space. Maybe that would look a little better. But as is right now, the composition really takes away from the idea of this posed, beautiful night sky photo. If they were just right in the center here, like there, and then you have this guy, the center comp would have worked. If you do want to place them in the corner, give me a little more of them and make it more deliberate so I can understand that. All right, I dig the idea of all of these cups in people's hands. And mostly I like this triangle of cups. And this guy I don't like because he's probably not part of this composition. So looking at this photo, my favorite part is here. Let's talk about your thought process when you look at this photograph or when you look at this moment as it's happening. And then you go, what is so interesting about this that I want to take a photo? Anytime I catch myself where I find something interesting, I always ask myself, how do I tell that story in the most deliberate way where how I felt can be translated through that photo or to the viewer? And normally, if it's just like, oh, look at this interesting moment of people drinking tea, if I just shot it as is, like how I'm just looking at it straight up, most times it's not as effective as if I can get in there and isolate that particular story. So, in this regard, there are many ways you can shoot this, I feel, more effectively. One, you could go close up to this cup over here and shoot through her to this lady smiling. And I like the light coming from this direction anyway. So we'll have directional light and you'll get this coffee drinker and then this lady and then maybe even the bride in the back. If you want to tell the story of these three coffee cups, I would try to frame her face in those three coffee cups and tell that story. So I'll wait for her to turn back around and pay attention to this side, and I'll crop here perhaps. Just his mouth, coffee cup, her talking to the bride. Again, once you take this photo, don't stop. Elaborate on your message, elaborate on the thing that piqued your interest in this photo. I'm almost tempted to remove this guy. So I was just doing that to see how I would enjoy this triangle happening here. Slightly more interesting, right? From here to here. Cool. This is a pretty fun shot. I love the colors in it, and I love how these two pillars and these four little windows and like there's like these four lights at the top. All of it works out really well. It looks very dramatic at the same time, fun and playful as well. The one thing that I do want to point out is this half silhouette idea. Sometimes it works, but in this particular place, it pulls us away from the very graphic nature of the backdrop. I wish they were in full silhouette, and I wish she just had her head up and laughing, and then he was just looking at her. Or they were both having their heads up and laughing, and their silhouettes had something fun and energy. Like the pose here needs to have the energy that this backdrop is providing you with. And a couple of things when you are editing and you're placing, you know, this piece on top of this piece, right? That you get rid of these things that line up. Because I know you've cloned this because of the way that that lines up like that. If you're going to use a clone tool, if you're going to get rid of things, I would really hope that you go in there and make sure that your tracks are covered. And this is a pretty simple thing, and it was bothering me anyway, so I'll just probably get rid of it. It might be tiny for you, but like small things like that where you leave behind evidence makes you look like you Photoshop everything, even though you may have just done this for this particular photo. Now when somebody else, like if your audience looks at this and goes, oh look, that's Photoshopped, so this entire photo was just made in Photoshop. You know what? I think 50% of your work should be in getting the photo right in post sometimes. And sometimes it's maybe more, sometimes it's less. Listen, I think that Photoshop is important and Lightroom as well. Like editing your photo is part and parcel of taking the photo. And we've been retouching photos since photography existed. But it's telltale signs when you leave them behind that just feels disingenuine. I would just look out for those little details. The light on this bride is really nice. I like that soft, beautiful light. I wish she was right in the center between the two parts here. So her head would fall into this bokeh area. Just watch out for these lines, right? So that when you have them, that you manage to look at your composition so that it matches. So she's right here, this line is over here, this line is over here, therefore it's not balanced. And then she's being cut off by this bit of bokeh that's happening behind her. So little details like that. And then this thing can be moved. I'd move it out because there's only one of them. Or I'd try to find the other one and place it on this side. I know it's small details, but the small details are what makes your photo. And then watching this distance and this distance, right? But other than that, I really like the light on her. I really like how she is expressive here. I wish she was laughing or smiling more naturally, but you know that has to do with a little bit more banter, or you just have to get her to be comfortable a little bit. Also, watch out for arms, right? This is a very good opportunity for you to kind of soften this arm, bring this elbow down, take this arm down a little bit more so I'm not seeing all of it. So just hide the arm a little behind this part here. So you're just going to have about that much covered. That will look a little better. I like this. I like this background. I like the use of this beautiful little light streak thing that's happening in the back. That's really cool. The balance of color on her skin feels a little too warm for me. And her pose is a little bit like, I can tell that she's thinking about posing, or her head is not in the game for this photo. I would break that up a little bit. So this is where, you watch the person and you take this photo and you look at it and you go, everything looks fantastic. You have a really nice place to take the photo. You figured out your composition. Your pose looks great. Now everything now banks on that expression. But everything else about this photo I love. I just wish that expression was there on her face.